Hello everyone, just bear with me. I have to put one more channel, but this is a very important interview. Just a second. So I'm here. Oh, okay. Let's do what we have. So, do you remember a few days ago, I showed you a video that what is happening in New York City, and there is the governor through an executive order decided that they can put in a quarantine facility any person they want without reason. And there is only one lawyer in the whole New York City that is suing the government. So welcome to my community, Bobbie Anne Cox. And she will explain, she knows the things firsthand. First, what is this executive order and all the ramifications?
Yes. Hi, Carlos. Thanks for having me on. Right. So yes, I'm a New York attorney. I've been practicing for about 25 years now. And so what you are referring to is, yeah, it's actually not an executive order. It's actually a Department of Health regulation. So through the Department of Health, so the lawsuit I have right now is against the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, the commissioner of the Department of Health in New York. Her name is Dr. Mary Bassett, the Department of Health for the state of New York, and the Health Planning Council in the state of New York. And I'm representing a group of New York state legislators, Senator George Borrello, Assemblyman Chris Tague, Assemblyman Mike Lawler. And I'm also representing together with them a citizens group called Uniting New York State. And the basis of the lawsuit is that the governor and the Department of Health have created this regulation through the Department of Health. So it's basically a rule that the Department of Health made. And it says that the Department of Health can pick and choose which New Yorkers have to go either quarantine or isolate in their home, or they can remove you from your home and force you to isolate and quarantine in a facility that they choose, they meaning the Department of Health. And it's really, it's an astonishing regulation. They give themselves this power, and it's for any New Yorker, not just New York City. This applies, it's a regulation from the state Department of Health, so it applies throughout the state of New York. So it doesn't matter where you live in New York, they can use this regulation and issue an order against you for isolation or quarantine. There's no time limit. So the Department of Health gets to pick how long they can lock you down in your home or lock you up in a facility. There's no age restriction. So they can do this to you. They could do this to your child or your grandchild. They could do this to your elderly parent or your elderly grandparent. There's no age restriction here. And there's also no way for you to basically undo what they've done. So for example, there's no provision in this regulation that says how you could prove that you don't have a disease, you're not a health risk, because the regulation says the Department of Health just needs to think maybe you were exposed to a communicable disease. So you don't even have to actually have the disease. And if you do have the disease, you don't even have to pose a risk. I mean, it's unbelievable how much power they've given themselves. There's no due process in this regulation. And the whole premise of this lawsuit is that they basically made a law. The governor and the Department of Health, this is basically a law, but only the legislature can make a law, right?
Let me ask you, what is the difference between a regulation and an executive order? So it's implemented already. What is the difference first between a regulation and the other?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question because it's confusing for a lot of people. Okay, so we have three branches of government, right? We have the judicial branch, which is the judges and the courts. Then we have the executive branch, which at the state level, that would be the governor and the agencies that the governor oversees. And then the third branch is the legislature. And that's the branch that makes the laws, right? Those are the people we elect. Here in New York, we elect them every 2 years, and they sit in our New York State Senate and our New York State Assembly. And those are the people that vote on laws and make the laws in New York State, okay? It's very similar to the federal level. So when you have a regulation, that does not come from the legislature. A regulation comes from an agency, and the agencies are in the executive branch along with the governor, okay? So if an agency is empowered to make a rule or a regulation, then they can do it. So if the legislature passes a law and says, hey, we want to be able to make any New Yorkers that we think might have been exposed to a disease, and we want to make sure that we can lock them up in their house or lock them in a facility somewhere. If the legislature makes a law like that, then it could make sense that the Department of Health could make a regulation that helps implement that law. So agencies can't just make up regulations out of thin air. They have to have a direction. They have to have the power given to them from the legislature and tell them, hey, this is the law we just passed. Help us implement that law, okay? And that's why the agency would make a regulation to say, how can we make this law go into effect? But that is not what happened here. So what happened here was the Department of Health made this regulation. They didn't have any directive from the Department of Health and from the New York State Legislature. So the Department of Health just made up the regulation. They put it into effect. It's been in effect. It actually first started under Governor Cuomo back in March of 2020 when the pandemic first started. And the difference was that the New York State Legislature made a change to the executive law back in March of 2020, and they gave Governor Cuomo, this crazy power to basically make law. They said that because of this emergency and nobody really knew what this was and everybody was scared and the media was making everyone so nervous, they said, okay, Governor Cuomo, you can issue directives, mandates, laws, whatever. He turned around and he wrote an executive order and he gave that power to his Department of Health, the commissioner of his Department of Health. So they made this regulation under Cuomo because of that special power that he had. But then a year later, in March of 2021, the legislature took the power away from Governor Cuomo. And they changed the executive law back to the way it was before, and they extinguished his ability to make directives or mandates or laws, right? So when he lost his power, it only makes sense that the agency would have lost their power because it was temporary and it was an emergency. But the agency, so then Cuomo steps down. He's no longer the governor. Kathy Hochul becomes the governor of New York in August of 2021. And she has the Department of Health just keep issuing the same regulation. So every couple of months, they're issuing this emergency regulation, but number one, you don't have the power that Cuomo had, because he got that special power from the legislature and then they took it away, and then number two, you don't have the power because the legislature didn't give it to the agency directly. Like, the legislature never passed a law saying that they want to force New Yorkers to lock down or to be able to be locked up, right? So the whole premise of the lawsuit is they don't have this power.
Okay, when you talk, you are shocked about this, right?
I
Shocked.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
But you are shocked, but I came to this country from Argentina when those things are everyday things for freedom and for other things. How do you think I feel? How do you think the millions and millions of immigrants? I went to a rally yesterday. It was Latinos for Medical Freedom. There are 15 millions of Latinos in California, and we came for freedom. How do you think we feel? Totally lost. I mean, not me, because I have things that helps me to be grounded. But I wanted to tell you, because you explained so well all the things that nobody knows. Absolutely nobody knows. And I invite you, anyone who has a question, absolutely nobody knows. And I just put in the video. If anybody has a question, please write the question here, and Bobbie will answer. So now that you explained the things and the history of this, this is like a bad dream.
Yeah.
So you're suing the governor because they don't have that power. The interesting thing for me, Bobbie, is that most people have no clue of those things that you are telling us.
That's right.
An issue such an important issue, and I remember when we had this conversation over the phone a couple of days ago, you told me what happened in New York happened in the whole state, and I felt my Californian pride. I said, no, what happened in California happened in all day. But yesterday in the rally, this woman said, what happened in California and in New York happened everywhere. So the point is, if this keeps happening in New York, what do you think? And I am telling the audience, what do you think is going to happen in your cities, in your state? So this is extremely important. Now, what is the situation of the lawsuit? Tell us, how did it go? How is it going?
Yeah, so we filed the lawsuit the beginning of April. So it was just over 2 months ago. And so far, we've won each of the steps along the way, so to speak. We had filed by order to show cause. We wanted to get an expedited review of the case, since the governor and the Department of Health were issuing this as an emergency regulation. And so we filed by order to show cause. The judge granted it. So that was terrific. Then the Attorney General, so the Attorney General in New York State represents the governor and the Department of Health and everything. So I'm dealing with the Attorney General's office. They removed the case to federal court, which was a little crazy because we filed it in New York State court because this is a state issue, right? It has to do with New York State law. New York State legislature is having their power usurped by the New York State Department of Health. We're talking about New York State Constitution. It's everything having to do with the state. But the Attorney General removed the case, put it in federal court, and they tried to say that this was about federal law and federal claims, which was not true. So we had to fight to get back into state court. So I had to ask a colleague of mine to assist because federal court, you have to be admitted to each court separately. And the federal court that I'm admitted to is near Manhattan, and the federal court they removed it to is up in Western New York. So I had to pull a colleague in to help me, so that otherwise it would have taken me weeks to, even just get admitted to the court. Anyway, so we had to do motion practice. We had to fight against, the Attorney General, and the judge ruled in our favor, and he said, I agree, this doesn't belong in federal court. So he sent us back to state court. And then the third thing was there was a group of New York State legislators who are not part of our lawsuit, but they wanted to file an amicus brief. So just for people that aren't sure what that is, an amicus brief is a brief. So it's a legal document that's written by someone who's not part of the lawsuit, but they have a really strong interest in the outcome of the lawsuit. So they would file with the court a brief, which basically supports one side or the other, right? So in this case, it was a group of New York State legislators that wanted to support our side of the case, right? So they go to submit the brief, and the Attorney General's office, they block them. They said, no, we don't approve. We don't think the judge should be allowed to read your brief. So it's very rare that you would try and block an amicus brief, but they did. So then we had to do motion practice and fight over, should the judge allow the brief into the court or not? And ultimately we won that motion. The judge granted our motion. So now the amicus brief is allowed in court. It's, can be part of the evidence. The judge can read it and consider it. And so now we just last week, just over a week ago, we had oral arguments in front of the judge. And so now we're waiting for the judge to issue his decision in the case. So we're at the point where we're waiting to see what he decides.
The first question that I have, why the general attorney diverted the case to federal court?
So in my opinion, I think they were doing it for a couple of reasons. One, I think to waste time, because I think they knew that we would try and get back to state court. So I think that they were hoping it would take several weeks to get, motion practice and fight it out and get back to state court. But we were really lucky because I asked the federal judge for expedited review, and he granted it. And what normally probably would have taken at least a month, maybe two, to have this motion practice and try and get back to state court. Thankfully, the judge granted expedited review. So we only lost a week. So we were stuck in federal court for about a week. And when we had oral arguments, the judge listened to, the arguments, and then he issued his decision right then and there. And he said, this case belongs in state court. So he sent it back to state court. We had to amend our papers to make it crystal clear that this is not about, federal law, federal constitution, the fact that they were trying to say it was a federal case was really, you could see right through it, right? You could just see that they were trying to stall and derail the case. Same thing with the amicus brief. Nobody really opposes an amicus brief, right? And they were fighting tooth and nail to try and keep it out of the court. They didn't want the judge to read it. So
let me ask you, so is crystal clear as you said that diverting this lawsuit to federal court is malice, is just to try to stop the lawsuit. Now, this amicus brief, can the general attorney or the governor introduce that for their side, for somebody to support the as a defendants of the lawsuit? Can somebody, legislator, support the position of the government on your lawsuit?
yeah,
Okay.
that's a possibility.
Okay, did anybody did that?
No.
Okay, have you ever seen a doctor that is in public and supporting all these crises that we have? Have you ever seen somebody supporting, these things that they try to mandate? Have you ever seen anybody supporting this pandemic?
Well, I think a lot of, I think they do have a lot of support.
No, no,
The media, like you
no, no,
said
but
before,
the media doesn't count because we know there is all um, uh, they follow whatever they ask them to do. The investigative journalism doesn't exist anymore. My point is
yeah,
this: in the
and they're
same,
sweeping things like this under the rug,
yeah,
right?
well, so the media doesn't count. We know they are lying, but I haven't seen any organization, any clinic, any doctor supporting all this. But there are millions of people over the world against this crisis that we're
Right.
seeing. This is what I mean. So this Miko's brief, why we don't see anybody supporting the position of the governor? Because it's
Yeah,
totally
yeah,
wrong. That's my point.
yeah. And another point actually is, so there was proposed legislation very similar to this regulation. There was a New York State Assembly member who, for 7 years, was proposing this law that would allow the governor the power to force New Yorkers to either isolate or quarantine in a facility, all this stuff. Do you know there was not one other legislator in the whole New York Senate or the whole New York Assembly that would stand with the guy that wrote the proposed law? Not one. So for 7 years, he kept introducing this proposed law, and the lawmakers didn't want to touch it. It never left the committee where he introduced it. It was never voted on. There was never a companion bill issued in the Senate. It was like, oh, and then he ultimately, the author of this proposed law, ultimately withdrew it in December of 2021 because he was getting such backlash because the public started to learn about it and it was starting to circulate and people were just so upset. So he withdrew it, which is very rare. Usually a legislator won't withdraw. If they're proposing a law, they're not going to withdraw it. They might strike the enabling clause, but they're not going to actually withdraw it. And he withdrew it. So it was very obvious that the New York State legislature didn't want to do anything about forcing New Yorkers to isolate or quarantine, especially just because the Department of Health thinks maybe you were exposed to a communicable disease. They don't even have to prove it. This regulation allows them to force you to stay in your home or leave your home and go to a detention center, a facility, a camp, whatever you want to call it. And they get to tell you how long you have to stay there. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's so anti-American, it violates separation of powers because the executive branch is supposed to enforce the laws. They're not supposed to create the laws, right? The legislature creates the laws. And that's the premise of our lawsuit, is that you went behind the legislature, you went through the back door, you went around their backs, you took their power because only the legislature can make a law, and you went and made this law. They're calling it a regulation, but really it's a law. And you can't do that. So now we have to ask the court to put the executive branch back in their place, right? They're not supposed to be allowed to do this. So that's the whole premise of the lawsuit.
The other thing that I want you to explain is very simple, but most of us don't understand this. I heard another of your interviews, and you were saying very clearly the three branches has to check and balance each other. Just talk a little bit so people understand. It's very important.
Yeah. So the way that the founding fathers created our country was that there would be these three branches: the executive, the judicial, and the legislative, and that they would all be equal, right? They all are equal because they all have powers, but they have separate powers, right? So what one branch can do, the other branches can't do, but they're working all together to make our society function, right? So when you have one branch that tries to take power from another branch, this is why we have these checks and balances in place. So here in this case, we're going to the court and we're saying, hey, judicial branch, help us get the executive branch back in their lane, because they've now crossed over into the legislature's lane and they're trying to take the power of the legislature because they're making laws. I mean, they're calling it a regulation, but really it's a law. And if you think about it, if this regulation is allowed to stand, like if we don't strike it down, if the court doesn't say that it's illegal, it's then going to mean that the legislative branch isn't as powerful anymore as the executive branch. Because if the executive branch, if an agency can just make up a rule that conflicts with laws that we already have, that the legislature passed, then that means that the executive branch and the agencies are more powerful than the lawmakers, right? Because this regulation, not only does it conflict with the Constitution and separation of powers, it also conflicts with laws we already have in New York. So we have a law, it's Section 2120 of the public health law in New York State. And it says, if there is somebody that is a health risk to other people in the community, you can remove them from society. But there are a lot of steps you have to take before you can remove that person from society, right? And there are just, it's like one after the next, after all these steps that have to happen to protect the person, you know, to make sure you're not taking their liberty away from them in an unjust manner. And for example, number one thing that public health law says is, okay, the person has to actually have a communicable disease, right? Like the government can't just think maybe they were exposed, right? They have to actually have the disease. There has to be an investigation. The local public health authorities have to investigate. They have to have proof that the person is acting in an inappropriate way and they're putting other people at risk. And there has to be a hearing in front of a magistrate. You know, it's so comprehensive, right? This law and this regulation completely conflicts with that. It says, nope, we don't care about the law. We're just going to make this regulation. The Department of Health can do what they want. The governor can do what they want. The commissioner of health can do what they want. And it completely conflicts with the law, which has been a law for decades. I mean, it's been on the books in New York State for a long time. So if the court doesn't strike down this regulation that the Department of Health made, it's going to signal to the Department of Health and other agencies, hey, you can make any rules you want. You can conflict with the Constitution. You can conflict with New York State laws. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want, you know. And then it's going to happen in other states because other states are going to see, oh, New York is allowed to lock up their citizens if they think maybe they have a communicable disease. Why can't we do that? Hey, let's do the same thing. Right. So it's going to just open the floodgates and you're going to see agencies making rules that they don't have the power to make and they shouldn't have the power to make. And when you think about it, it makes sense that the legislature is the body that makes our laws because we elect those people. Right. Every couple of years, we go to the polls and we vote and we pick who we want to represent us in the legislature. And those are the people that make the laws. And if we don't like the laws that they're making, then we vote somebody else in, right? Next time you get someone to run against them and you vote for the other person instead of continuing to support them. So the legislators are held accountable for their actions by everybody voting. An agency in the executive branch, they're not elected. Those people are appointed. So the governor of New York appoints the commissioner of the health department, right? And then all the people that work in the health department, they're not elected. All those people are just government employees. So it's very dangerous to allow an agency to make laws or to make rules that conflict with our laws. because you can't vote those people out. What is your recourse? If these appointed officials, if these unelected government workers, agents, they're not elected, how do you say, well, we don't like this rule, or we don't, there's no way to vote them out because they're not voted in, they're appointed. So it's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous proposition to allow this regulation to stand and to allow agencies to make rules that conflict with the Constitution.
And now, it calls my attention a lot. How many other lawyers in New York City that they are aware of what you realize, that this law or this regulation is unconstitutional, and they call you, hey Bobbie, you're right, you're doing a great job, can I help you?
No, nobody's doing that.
Why? But this is
nobody's offering to help. I do have, so my colleague, Tom Marcel, is the attorney that helped me to get the case from federal court back to state court. And he's based like in the Albany area. He's great. He's brilliant. And he's definitely terrific. And then I have the New York State Assemblyman Andy Goodell. He's an attorney. He's one of the legislators that wrote the amicus brief. So he's one of the legislators that's part of the lawsuit now, even though he's not, like a plaintiff or a petitioner in the lawsuit. And he's been very supportive and terrific. But no, like just other attorneys, like randomly, no, nobody's doing that. I think the reason is there are, I think, a few reasons that I'm the only person that's doing a lawsuit like this, because maybe a lot of people don't know about this regulation. The governor is not really publicizing it, so maybe a lot of attorneys don't know it exists, and that's why I'm trying to get the word out about it so that people know what's going on. But also, I'm doing this pro bono. No one's paying me to do this. So I think probably a lot of attorneys, either can't or don't want to work for free. So I think that's another issue. And, I think also there's the whole, cancel culture thing. I think people are afraid of standing up and speaking out, and maybe you lose clients, maybe you lose friends, maybe people get upset with you because you're going against the mainstream, or it could be a lot of different reasons. But as far as I know, this is the only lawsuit in New York State about fighting the quarantine, the forced isolation and quarantines, and quarantine camp regulation, as a lot of people are calling it now. And I'm pretty sure it's the only lawsuit in the country like this, because I'm not aware of anybody that's suing in another state over forced quarantines and isolation.
This is for all lawyers in New York and actually in all over the country. Remember that the people who are doing this plan globally, they say that soon you will own nothing and be happy. So if you don't help Bobbie, soon you may be in a quarantine camp. I just telling you this in a lovely way. The other thing is this. What happens if a New Yorker right now is taken away to one of these quarantine camps or facilities?
Yeah, and that's the whole problem, is there's no due process in this regulation that they made. So there's no provision on how somebody gets out of quarantine. It says nothing about how you get out. All it says is it gives this tremendous power to the department, the commissioner of health, and whoever, the commissioner appoints. It gives this tremendous power to them. And it doesn't say anything about safeguarding the people, the citizens who they're locking up. And that was one of the things I was very pleased. That was one of the things that the judge asked the Attorney General's office when we had the oral arguments in front of the judge. He came right out and he said, So let's say you force a family into a hospital, right? You're saying, oh yeah, you guys are sick. You need to go stay in this hospital. He said, how do they get out? Like, what are the steps? How do they get out? And the Attorney General's office was just like, well, they can sue, they can sue the health department to try and get out. Like, he's like, they can bring an Article 78 proceeding, which is the name of the lawsuit. The type of lawsuit that I'm suing right now is Article 78. He said, well, they can do that. And the judge even said, yeah, but that's not a quick remedy. I mean, I've already been fighting this lawsuit for over 2 months, right? So you're going to tell me that you're going to lock up a family somewhere, and because you think that they were exposed to a communicable disease, and they're going to sit there for at least 2 months while a lawyer tries to get them out? I mean, it's unbelievable. This regulation is so illegal on so many levels. I can't believe I can't believe they made the regulation, and now I can't believe that they're defending it. I mean, they're fighting me tooth and nail, trying to keep this regulation alive. And their justification, according to the Attorney General's office, when we had the oral arguments in front of the judge, was, well, we need this power. We need the ability to have total control over the citizens. We need this power. Don't you want us to have this power? What if there's a health emergency? Don't you want us to be able to lock people up or lock them down? And I couldn't believe he actually said it out loud, but he said it out loud, right in front of the judge. But yeah, this is their idea. This is their idea. And I said, the public health law already says, if you want to remove somebody because you think they're a health threat, you can do it if you meet all of these criteria. And if you go through all of these steps, then you can remove someone. And it's supposed to be the local health authorities. This is not supposed to be at the state level, right? And his response was, well, that doesn't work so well. We the state level, we need the power. If people don't understand how wrong that is, and how severe this is, because some people think, what, the state, the government should be able to protect citizens or whatever. Of course they should be able to protect citizens, but you're supposed to follow the due process. You're supposed to follow the steps that are already laid out. You can't, it's in our Constitution. You cannot make laws that don't provide rights to the people, right? This is the cornerstone of our country and our society. Remember, the people that founded the United States of America, they came from tyranny under a king. They were subject to the King of England, and they were tired of it because their voices weren't being heard. They felt like they were being treated poorly and overtaxed, and it was tyranny. I mean, they had no way to have their voices heard, and that's why they broke away, and that's why they started this country. And here we are, almost 250 years later, and we have tyranny. This is tyranny. When one branch of government wants to do the job of the others, the people lose their voice. If you don't have a voice, if the legislature's voice is silenced because the agencies are now making the rules instead of the legislature making the rules, then the people's voices are silenced because the people speak through their representatives in the legislature. And that's why that branch is the one that makes the laws, because we, the people, are supposed to say, yes, this is who we want there. This is who I want to represent me. This is how I speak. My voice is through my representative. And that's why the representatives are always having your state senator, your state assemblyman, they'll always have a meet and greet, or they'll do, events where they come out and they meet the people and they say, oh, and they talk to you, or you can make an appointment and you can go meet with them, or you can send them an email or a phone call. Those are the people that you speak through as a citizen. But when the executive branch wants to take that power, the people have now lost their voice. And that is not okay. That leads to the people suffering.
But this is worse than the horror movies, because this law is in place right now.
The regulation, yeah.
The regulation is in place right now. Okay, let me tell you something. A couple of days ago, I did a live video, but I didn't talk about this because I don't know all the details. And I replay your video with Mel. And a woman from Australia says, we already have these detention camps here in Australia. And I've seen, Bobbie, there was a time that in a kind of Google Maps, or I don't know which maps, in an app in a phone in Australia, you look for construction sites, and they show these construction sites all over Australia, and people were all of a sudden they appear, and people were going and see what they are building there. There were all these quarantine camps. When people start spreading the word, this information from that app disappeared.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had the picture. So these people from Australia, my community page in Facebook that is surviving, I have people from all over the world. So those things are implemented in Australia. And if not only in the US, but in other countries, we don't follow this procedure that this strong woman and courageous, because you have to have the guts to do that. We are going to end up in a very bad situation. I still have hope. I have hope in humankind, in spirituality, in what keeps us alive, which is the energy that comes from the inside out. I want to tell you something. When we were talking on the phone, you said that your case is David against Goliath. Yesterday, Bobbie, there was a woman who found an organization in Spanish, and she calls her organization David against Goliath.
Oh.
Get it? Very smart.
Goliath.
Very smart. And she was so strong. I never heard her speech in a rally. I went to defeat the mandates in LA. Everybody's speech was fantastic, but this woman had a strength. So I wanted to tell you that you're not the only one. We are not the only ones. The other thing is, okay, I just asked all that. If you win, before this, I'm going to show people the website. I think I have it somewhere here. So this is, your site is Unified NYS, like I guess it stands for Unified New Yorkers.
It's the citizens group I'm representing made a website and a web page specifically for the lawsuit, so people can follow along with the lawsuit. They can get involved. You can volunteer. You can help us get the word out. But if people go to www.unitingnys.com/lawsuit. That's where they can find this web page, and it has a lot of information on there. So it's Uniting NYS, because the NYS stands for New York State. So unitingnys.com, and you can look at the top, and there's a lawsuit. It says lawsuit. You just click on that, and it brings you to the page. And we have, let's see, there are videos there about the regulation. There's a link to the regulation that you can click on it, and it'll show you where the regulation is. You can read it for yourself. There are pictures there. We did a press conference in Albany when we first launched the lawsuit a couple months ago. So there are photographs from there. There's a summary of what the case is about. There's a timeline that shows people when the case started and then all the steps along the way and where we are today. And yeah, there are some videos there too, that you can watch about there's like a short 2-minute video about, the regulation and our lawsuit. And then there are steps that people can take, like if people want to get involved. The biggest thing we need right now is people to help spread the word, because mainstream media is not picking this up. So we really need people to talk about this, take the links from that page. There's even a social media flyer that you can download and you can post it on your social media apps, which talks about the regulation and our lawsuit. So there's a lot of information there, and people can help by posting on their social media about it. They can send out flyers to their friends about it. If anybody knows podcasters or radio show hosts, TV hosts or newspaper reporters, like if anybody knows people in the media, reach out to them, ask them, tell them about this regulation, tell them about our lawsuit. I'm happy to talk to whomever and explain the case. And yeah, we have to get the word out. People need to know what's going on, even if they don't live in New York, because like I said, if this takes hold in New York, it's going to spread. The other states are going to say, oh, well, we can do it too. Why can't we do it? And it'll just become the new norm, right? Which we cannot allow that to happen. This cannot be the new normal, that the executive branch takes the power of the legislative branch. They also, I'm not sure if I mentioned this before. I don't think I did. They put in the regulation that they can use local law enforcement to enforce their orders. So you could get a knock on the door, like during dinner, and it could be like the sheriff or the local police. And they could either tell you, oh, sorry, you can't leave your house for the next, who knows what, 20 days, 3 months, 8 months, who knows? I mean, there's no limit. There's no limit in the regulation. Or they can remove you from your home. They could just knock on the door and say, hey, well, you know what? We have an order here from the Department of Health, and you need to report to this, whatever you want to call it, detention center or camp or whatever, all right, let's go. And the regulation also says that when you're there, when you're in one of these detention facilities, they get to tell you what you can and cannot do. Imagine that. So maybe they tell you you can't leave your room, or that you have to sleep in a room with 50 other people. I mean, it's unbelievable. There's no due process protections in this regulation. So even if they had the power to make it, which they don't have the power to make it, but even if they did have the power to make it, it's still illegal because it has no due process protections for the people. Right? It's unbelievable how it just flies in the face of our Constitution on multiple levels.
All right. I was showing the website when you were talking about your website. Could you please tell me what is the flyer? In which link should I find it? The flyer that you mentioned.
Yeah. So the flyer is, I think if you scroll down the page, there'll be a link. It'll say, like it's things you can do to help get involved.
In which
and then I think there's a link that says help spread the word, and you can download
in Take Action, maybe in Take Action, because spread the word about quarantine camp lawsuit. Could be that one. No, because
Yeah, are you on the lawsuit page?
No, I am in the take action. Should I go to the lawsuit?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. If you go to the lawsuit page, because
We're
yes,
fighting for you. There is. We are fighting for you. The regulation, the lawsuit. Join us. Subscribe. Please subscribe, people, so you know what is going on. This is very important to help us spread the awareness. Okay, got it.
yes,
Okay.
and
But I have to download it. Let me
there
download it
should
and
be,
show it. But let me see, because I already have a place
yeah,
for
there
all your
should be a link
information.
there.
Miscellaneous.
Yeah, you like you mentioned, I didn't mention that to people. If you subscribe, if you go to the website unitingnys.com, if you subscribe, then you'll get a weekly email. Like they're sending out a newsletter every week, and it updates people on what's going on with the case. And other things too, but yeah, if you just click on subscribe, there's no charge. They're doing everything is all free information. So it's great to subscribe because then automatically you're joining the fight, right? But you're also able to stay up on all the latest news and information about it and what's going on. So yeah, that's really a huge thing, is if people can help spread the word. It's mainstream media not talking about this means people aren't paying attention unless you hear it from somebody else, right? Because you're not going to see it on the nightly news or across the major newspapers, the national newspapers. They're not picking this up. It's being swept under the rug.
As I mentioned on Saturday, I'm going to contact the High Wire, Del Big Tree, Stu Peters, and anyone that is watching. If you know anybody anywhere, you contact me, and we are going to get together to spread the word of this important lawsuit. Um,
Yeah, that'd be
uh,
great.
just a question to this lady who created the site. It's in Spanish, David against Coviat. I sent a text to her yesterday and I said, I am impressed how aware, how awakened you are. And she told me, I believe that God gave me that awareness. And I told her, I believe it's true. And we don't have to be conscious of that. But I heard in the interview with Mel that from the very beginning of this crisis, that's the way I wanted to call it, or the pandemic in March 2020, you realized that something was fishy, something wasn't right. So tell me, what happened with you that you start seeing things that most people don't see?
Yeah. So in March of 2020, so I they think in New York that the first COVID cases were in Westchester County, and not far from where I live and work. And so all of a sudden, there was like hysteria going on in my county. And when the governor came out and said, okay, everybody's locked down, right? Nobody can leave their house. You can't go to work. You can't go out, right? They said 2 weeks to flatten the curve. That's what they were telling all the New Yorkers. Stay home just for 2 weeks. We're going to flatten the curve, and then everyone's going to go back to normal, right? But as soon as Governor Cuomo issued this lockdown order, the hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I was like, oh, no, no, no. No, the government cannot lock you in your house for no reason. Like 19 million New Yorkers were told that they can't leave their houses. And then of course, 2 weeks turned into 4 weeks, turned into 4 months, it was incredible. And people were calling me, emailing me, texting me. They were so upset because they didn't know what to do. All these small business owners couldn't open their doors, whether it was a bar or a restaurant or even just a shop, whether, ice cream shop or a clothing store or a hair salon. I mean, all these places couldn't open their doors. And people were like, oh my God, it's been months. Like I can't pay my bills if I can't service my customers. And people didn't know, should I just open my doors? Like, what's going to happen? Can they arrest me? Can they put me in jail? So I was getting bombarded with all these questions. And I eventually just started making videos to talk about these issues and try and answer questions in the videos, because I was getting overwhelmed with all the questions and text messages and everything. So I ended up just starting like a not really a podcast, but a channel where I just started posting the videos, which I still do today. I don't do it every week, but when I can, I'll post information. Now, most of it's usually about the lawsuit, but it turned into people not knowing, because listen, this never happened before. People weren't sure what their rights were. Most people don't walk around with the Constitution in their back pocket. Like, they don't know, is this legal? Is this not legal? Are they infringing on my rights? Can they do this? Can't they do this? Right. So it's so important for people to get educated, because then you know what your rights are. And also, when you see other people are standing up for something, you get emboldened to stand up with those people, right? So if people don't know about this regulation and people don't know about our lawsuit, then there's not going to be so much support. And when it comes to their state or it comes to their town, they're oh my gosh, and they're going to freak out and they're not going to know what to do. So it's so important people know about this, even if they're not in New York, because it can come to your town. It can come to your state. It's already here in New York. And I'm telling you, things that happen in New York typically will spread across the country, but whether it's, fashion, like clothing or laws or, crazy regulations like this. People need to just be aware and then understand, hey, not everybody can go around giving speeches or, go on podcasts or radio interviews. I totally understand that. But you know what? You can support in other ways. You can support just by posting on your social media, our flyers, or take the link to this interview and post it on, social media sites and let people hear this interview and understand what's going on. We got to spread the word the old-fashioned way, right? When mainstream media won't help, it's got to just be word of mouth.
And regarding that, the page that I am broadcasting right now reached 253,000 people in just 8 weeks. And the Freedom Convoy of Canada helped a lot. And people were asking me, make an email list, and I just didn't do it. And then I don't remember when I did it. So I am asking whoever is watching and is not in my email list, you go to this link that I'm going to copy in the chat, and we are going to send you information that you are not going to find anywhere. Not only that we cannot post freely here. So just sign up for that. Let me put it in the chat. And this is the way that everybody's conveying information through emails. So before I forget, Bobbie, as soon as you have any news, even if it's a tiny bit news on your lawsuit, you call me and we do another interview so people know.
Absolutely. Yes, that would be great. That would be great.
Anything?
Yeah, but no, you're right. If people sign up for the weekly emails, then they can have the up-to-date information. Not everybody's on social media, or not everybody's on the same social media. So it is helpful to have also, the email communication for sure. People always can check the website too. If you go back to, unitingnys.com/lawsuit. You can always check. We'll have updated information on there too, so people can see the status of the case. I'm sure, if this judge rules in our favor, I'm sure the Attorney General is going to appeal it. I don't think the state is going to give up their tyrannical regime so easily. So I'm sure they're going to appeal it to the next level, which is the appellate division. And then, we'll have to argue in front of, that'll be a panel of judges. And then there's one more court above that. Which is the Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in New York State. So I'm thinking that they're going to, if they don't win, I'm thinking they're going to appeal it because they think they're entitled to this power. I mean, that's basically what they're saying, is they think that they should have this power, this total, complete power over people, and people shouldn't have a say. There should be no restrictions on them, no rights for the people, no protections for the people. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. We saw this at the federal level too. I want to point that out to your viewers, because if everybody remembers last year, when Biden told OSHA, now OSHA is a federal agency, right? It's an agency that's under the executive branch. And Biden, who's the head of the executive branch, he told, on the federal level, he told OSHA to make this regulation that said, any employers in the United States that had 100 or more employees had to require those employees to get the COVID-19 shot. Otherwise, they had to wear a mask to work, and they had to test, get tested, I don't know, weekly or whatever it was. So he got sued, right? They sued OSHA, they sued Biden. It went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. And in January of this year, the Supreme Court ruled on it. And they said, no, you can't do that. They said, you are an agency, OSHA, you are an agency in the executive branch. You can't make a law. That they said that was really a law. It wasn't a regulation. They said you have to have direction from the legislature in order to make a rule like that. If the legislature passed a law that said something like that, and then OSHA made a regulation to support that law that Congress passed, that's a different story. But Congress didn't pass a law that says anything about, 100 or more employees, and you got to enforce your employees to get the COVID-19 shot or wear a mask. Like, Congress did not make a law like that. So the United States Supreme Court said, no, you executive branch, you overstepped. You went too far. You went over into the legislature's lane, and you took the power from the legislature, and you basically made a law that you weren't allowed to make, right? So this is very similar to our case. It's a very similar argument to our case. So I'm really hoping that the court understands that it's pretty much the same argument, because they did pretty much the same thing. The executive branch, an agency in the executive branch, did something which they're calling a regulation, but it's really a law. And I'm hoping that they strike it down and they say, no, that's not constitutional. That's you breached separation of powers. That's what we're hoping for.
Yeah. Well, with that antecedent that what happened with the Supreme Court in January, we should have hope on this, on what you are doing. And not only that lawsuit and yours, but anything else that could come on the horizon. So, anything else you want to tell us?
I would just say if your viewers can take some time to go through that webpage, unitingnys.com/lawsuit. It's really it would be helpful, because if people, there are a couple videos on there. I mean, there are other videos on the website. If you go to other pages of the website, the news page and stuff has also videos about the lawsuit. But if you just watch a couple of them, you don't have to watch them all. If you just watch a couple of them, they're not very long. It'll really help you understand this regulation and how horrible it is and authoritarian. And then please spread the word about it. Spread the word about the regulations, spread the word about our lawsuit. If people can donate, there's a donate button there. You can click on the donate button. I'm doing this all pro bono, so donations are very welcome, but just spread the word. It's so important. You don't want to see this happen in New York, because then it can happen everywhere. Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I have to mute my microphone for the. We thank you so much for your information, all this information. Education, information is power, and we wish you your best. We're going to do whatever we can, take action to go to your website. I wanted to tell you, during the chat, many people put your website. When you were talking, I show in the screen how to navigate your website, the subscription, and everything else. So everybody who was here will know what we have to do. The other thing I wanted to add, many people from both sides of the aisle, the ones who believe the narrative, the official narrative, are afraid because of that, and the ones who are aware of all this evil doing, some of them are afraid too. But the best way to lose this fear is to be active, to be an activist, and we don't have to be speaking on a stage. Let me tell you a story. Yesterday I went to this rally. And because of the speakers, I said, well, this is going to be very well organized. We got there, and I put my tripod. I was the only one from the media showing this live in Facebook and YouTube. And all of a sudden, I see that there is 2 police officers, and I get close to the organizers. I really didn't know anyone. Some of them because they spoke in big events, and they say that we cannot use the speakers and the microphones because we cannot plug the power, and you cannot use your tripod. You have to use the camera with the hand. Well, I have in my car a big speaker that has batteries. I always take to the rallies, and I brought my speaker, and they did the 2 hours rally with my speaker. Otherwise, they wouldn't have a speaker. So it's a little thing, but makes me feel so good. So little things like that, to help here, to help there, to be active, even if you live in the middle of nowhere, sending emails, sharing, signing petitions, and things like that. We all can help. Today, I was watching this movie from a little clip, because somebody posted in my page of the I don't remember the name of the movie. It's the ants and the grasshoppers. I don't remember. You have to have kids. And then the grasshoppers are taking over the control of the ants. And the boss of the grasshopper says, do you think one ant will hurt you? And throws a rock or something to one of the other grasshoppers. No, it doesn't hurt. Throws another rock to the other, and so on. And then he unplugged this container with tons of those rocks, and the rocks comes down and cover all the grasshoppers. This is what happens when you let one ant speak up. So imagine if all of them. So this is like that. So we don't have to lose hope. Actually, there is a lot of hope. Thank you so much. And my channel, everything that I can do for you, we are always available.
Thank you. Thank you, Carlos, for having me on. I appreciate it.
Okay.